Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be a video on my top 10 tips for conceptual self-portraiture. I've been shooting self-portraits for around 4 years now, and along the way I feel like I've learnt a few things that may help people who are wanting to get into it or maybe just struggle with focusing issues. So I just want to make it easier for everyone to maybe get started, or if anyone's been doing it for years and they watch this video and at least take one thing from it, then I'm happy with that. Some of the tips are designed more for composite work, but you can take what you need from them and hopefully you'll like them and you can use them in your daily practice. What I'll do as well is I'll leave all the links below to everything that I mentioned in this video. Check the description box and it'll all be there. So tip number 1 is get yourself a wireless trigger. I have 4 simple, cheap ways that you can do this. Number 1 is simply the inbuilt timer on your camera. This is obviously great because it's literally on your camera and all you have to do is set it, press the shutter, and then you've got 10 seconds to run in front of the camera and then you can take your picture. Obviously practical because it's accessible and it's inbuilt on your camera, so if you forget any other triggers or wireless triggers, then you've got that there. However, it's pretty impractical, like I've just said, if you have to run back and forth from the camera and do the 10 seconds, because maybe if you want to be a bit further away you can't really run to your position and get in position and then it takes the picture and then you have to run back to the camera and obviously see what the picture's like. It's a pretty simple and easy way to start. That's how I started. I always use a 10-second timer. But the next one I have, number 2, is a 1 meter remote cord. Now I had this because on my D700 when I first started taking pictures, it didn't have the option, or I don't think it had infrared, so the little remote triggers wouldn't work on it, so I had to pretty much use a cord from the camera to my hand. But with this you could actually focus, so it's pretty good. I think I could stand probably about 3 meters away with my arms stretched, and then you'd stand in front of the camera and take your picture, and you could just grab the cord when you needed it. Obviously that's kind of like annoying because you have to be near the camera. So the third one is a wireless remote. This is obviously an infrared little remote and you can press it multiple times and your camera will go off and react to it. You can be as far away as the infrared will take you. For my Nikon one I have the MLL3 wireless trigger, and it is just the cutest little thing because you can carry it in the shot, you know, hide it whilst you're photographing. Now the fourth one is my absolute favourite and I use it every single time now, would be to use a Wi-Fi and a mobile app. I have the Nikon app where I can use it to trigger the camera, I can focus on me, I literally tap on the screen and it focuses. Can't change the settings, which is slightly annoying, but hopefully they will update that so you can. But the Wi-Fi just means that you can be as far away from your camera, you can even view the pictures on your phone whilst taking it, and you can download the pictures too, so it's amazing for that. And I use that pretty much every time that I do a self-portrait now because it's just so much easier than running back and forth from the camera. So tip number 2 is to get yourself a good, heavy, sturdy tripod. I've been through so many tripods that are really flimsy and they're not great. I've had a tripod fall on me and I've had to catch the camera. Luckily I was close to the camera so I could just catch it. You want something that's reliable. Now I have a Manfrotto tripod, but it's probably another more obvious tip, but you just need to get a tripod that's heavy and sturdy so that if you're going out shooting in different weather conditions, particularly wind, it will just stay in place when you're away from the camera, so you don't have to worry about it. Tip number 3 is to invest in a great portrait lens. I have a few options that are maybe from the cheaper end to more expensive end. I have a 50mm 1.8 which cost me probably around £60 off eBay, which is so cheap. I started using that when I first started getting into self-portraits. The next lens that I have is a 50mm 1.4. This is obviously a lower aperture so it gets a lot more light in, it's a lot better quality. It's great for portraits. However, in the recent days I've turned more to the 35mm, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but the 50mm was my go-to lens for many years. Another lens that I would recommend is the 85mm 1.8. This is amazing for cropped headshots, creamy backgrounds, a lot of bokeh. It's beautiful, it creates a really sharp forefront image and it's just beautiful for all the dreamlike images. Now, although an 85mm is a great portrait lens, I also find it a little bit limiting when it comes to doing self-portraits. So the next next lens that I suggest would be to get a 35mm 1.4 Sigma Art. It's beautiful and I know a lot of people who use it. It's absolutely insane for realistic shots because I know 35mm is pretty, it's like a wide enough angle that it gets a lot in but it still has focus on a central point because it's long and it lengthens you and it lengthens the image, so it creates like a more dramatic image. It's also great for when you're expanding images, so if you're photographing a self-portrait and you want more of the sky, more of the floor, more of the sides, then you can just literally take pictures and it gets so much in that you can obviously edit in after, and that's what I love about the 35mm. So my tip number 4 is to get yourself something that you can use as a place saver for focusing. So you've got your camera set up, you've got your tripod, you've got your lens, and you've got your timer, and you're ready to go. But you can't get the focus. Now this is where the place saver comes in. Obviously if you can get a friend to jump in and focus on them and then set the focus to manual so it stays in that focus and you've got your spot where you're going to stand, then that's fine. Get a friend to do that. I obviously don't use this as much because I use my Wi-Fi on my phone, which I can actually press on the viewfinder, which focuses on me when I'm in the shot. But before this, and if you don't have Wi-Fi on your camera, then using a place saver is amazing for getting the focus right. I used to use things like my space hopper, which I've shown in a previous video, a pair of ladders, a stool, a spare tripod, something that you can easily carry, pop in shot, focus on, and then you can take it out and then you can get in the shot and take the picture. My tip number 5 is to keep the camera settings consistent. This applies more to composites, so if you're taking pictures of different things in an image to maybe edit in later. So once you have chosen a speed, aperture, ISO and everything else, keep it at that so that when you're photographing an image to maybe composite in later, all your images that you are photographing will be the same setting. This is just so that when you open your pictures up into Lightroom or Photoshop, all your pictures are going to be the same consistency in terms of brightness and depth of field. If you're changing between 1.8 aperture and a 32 aperture, it's going to be ridiculously different in depth of field. So you're going to get more of a focused foreground and a blurred background, and then you change it to 32, everything's just going to be in focus and you're not going to get that realistic look. If you really want that unrealistic HDR look, then that's fine, but for doing a composite, it's always good just to keep your settings really consistent so that editing is a lot easier. So tip number 6 is to keep the perspective the same. Again, this applies more for composite work. However, if you're having unintentional composite, if you're photographing something at the same perspective, then you can add in different arms, you can add in different legs, you can add in different bits of a dress or bits of the hair. And if you're at the same perspective, it's going to look a lot more realistic when you're adding in hair that's come from a similar perspective of the image, so that it just looks more realistic essentially. So one example of this is the last portrait that I took of 2016, and this was a portrait just of me stood on a log in the forest and we had all the fog in the background and it was amazing. I edited the feet from a different image onto the base image because I wanted it to look like I was on my tiptoe, and it worked out because obviously I was in the same perspective, or I photographed it in the same perspective, so I can use the feet from one image to composite onto the other image and make it look realistic, and that they were coming from the same angle, they had the same light, they had the same shadow, and it blended in so well. So tip number 7, I think that's what it is now, is to keep the lighting the same. And this is very closely related to tip number 5 in that you've got to keep the settings the same, because obviously the settings apply to what kind of light you've got. And again, if you're shooting with natural light, stick to natural light. If you're shooting with flash, stick to flash. This is more for composites, and I keep reiterating this. It's more for when you are changing things in an image that you have from different images and that you can composite on top. It's just to make it more realistic. My tip number 8 is to shoot loads, and I mean like shoot forever. Well, maybe not forever, but if you are photographing and you think that you've got them all, just keep going. I always do this if I'm like, right, I think I've got the shot, but I just want to go the extra mile just for look. So I'll do this by shooting at least like 100 more frames, so that I know that if I come back to editing and I'm like, oh no, I haven't got enough images, or I haven't got that really like nailed on shot, then I know the 100 more images, I've at least got one out of there that's going to be useful and it's going to work. tip number 9 is to sketch your ideas down. This is probably one of my favourite tips to tell people when they're like, how do you get your ideas? How do you keep your motivation? How do you come up with things on the spot? How do you know, all that kind of questions. I write down all my ideas when they come to me, and I will write it down in my phone, I'll write it in my notes, I'll sketch it down. I have actually got a few sketched down in my phone now. So I have a little section in my phone that says photo shoot ideas, and I'll just show you one that I've got, and I just write down a little bit of a sketch. So I just do a sketch of it with just quickly, just so that I know that when I come back to it, or when I'm like, oh, I'm just stuck for ideas, I can just go to it and then see. I also have a few notepads that I take with me everywhere that I use to just really hone in on ideas, and usually my ideas come quite sporadic, so they'll all come at once, and I'm like, whoa, I need to write these down, that I can focus on one at a time and then come back to them at a later date. And finally, number 10 is to use props, objects and words. And these are something that I always keep in my mind when I'm coming up with ideas. And this is kind of following on from number 9. I just found it really important to share it as a tip on its own. So if you're struggling to come up with a concept, get an object and think, what can I do with this object? How can I create this into an image? What else do I need with this prop to create a successful image? Do I use it and hint at it? Do I create an image around it? What relates to it? So if it's a word, what kind of, if it's a pencil, what relates to pencil? Is it paper, lead, rubber, all that kind of stuff? That's just an example. Also, will I shoot outdoors? Is this suited to studio light? Is it suited to natural light? And one I actually really love thinking about is, what mood do I want to portray? On one side, do I want to create a happy, frivolous image, or do I want to create something that's deep, dark, emotional, have a word and just flow with it, just go with it? And that's it. I really hope that you can take something from these tips, but you can take what you need from it and help you get started in self-portrait, or maybe they will add to your existing self-portrait knowledge. Let me know what you thought of these tips in the comments below. Also, if you have any questions on these tips, then please let me know. If you have any other suggestions or tips that you think that need to be mentioned, then also comment below so other people can see them. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and also give me a little thumbs up below, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!